everyone. My name is Emma. I have a story I want to tell you. A paranormal story. This story was a turning point in my life, because there was already a lot of disorder in my own life before I experienced these events. Family pressure, betrayal by friends, betrayal by my lover, ridiculous events at work, and finally my dismissal from my job all came together. That's why I wanted to get away from everyone and start my life from scratch with the little money I had left. Maybe it would be difficult. It was actually very difficult, but I had to do it. Because the people around me didn't contribute even a single bit to my well-being, and I felt guilty. If you ask me why I feel guilty now, it's because those were the best times of my life. I couldn't spend these beautiful moments fighting with ridiculous people and trying to fix them, or even trying to make them love me. That's why I wanted to start my life from scratch. I left my home, my family, my friends, my workplace, my childhood home, and moved to a quiet apartment outside the city. Since my family knew about my situation, no one said anything. I was already a financially self-sufficient person. The apartment looked quite clean and good from the outside. However, the interior was a bit old. The owner of the house, Mr. Harold, is 65-70 years old, and his hair and beard have turned white. He was a short, thin man. The price of the house was reasonable for me. That's why I rented the house without even thinking. Mr. Harold just told me, "Guys, don't come home too late and be as quiet as possible. Don't make too much noise," he said. I said, "Don't worry, I'll be living alone anyway, so there won't be much noise." Mr. Harold looked a little strange. He was constantly plowing me from head to toe, talking to himself in a whisper. From the first day I moved there, it felt like my life was starting to get a little more organized. I had saved some money while I was working before, so I needed a few days off from work and to travel and clear my head. I moved. I had a 2-room house. The house was old, but it had the things I needed. In the bedroom, there is a large double bed, a huge wardrobe, and a beautiful mirror next to it. There were even pots and pans in the kitchen cupboards. In the living room, there was an old TV, a small sofa, an old dining table, and 2 chairs. As soon as I entered the house, I immediately started cleaning. I swept the whole place thoroughly, top to bottom. Then I went out and went to the nearest supermarket and bought something for the fridge. I didn't buy much, because I haven't had any appetite lately. That's why I didn't want it to get spoiled in the meantime. It was getting dark when I left the market and came home. This building had 3 floors. I was staying on the 2nd floor. As I was walking up the stairs, I suddenly stopped. I turned around and looked, because at that moment I felt the presence of someone behind me. But I was wrong. There was no one there. I quickly walked up the stairs and to the door. As soon as I got inside and closed the door, I quickly ran upstairs. I didn't hear wrong this time. I opened the door again and looked outside. I couldn't see anyone. Anyway, it's probably someone who lives upstairs. I thought maybe he was in a hurry. I closed and locked my door. I quickly brought the bags in my hand and placed them in the closet. I made myself a nice coffee and sat on the couch, trying to relieve the tiredness of today. After drinking my coffee, I checked if the TV was working. Unfortunately, the television was not working. I couldn't expect such an old TV to work anyway. I leaned back and took a deep breath. I closed my eyes. The couch was quite comfortable. As soon as he leaned back, he pressed down a deep burden. I fell asleep there. It was night and I was in a dark place with my dream. There was nothing visible around. Only zero darkness. It was like I was in the middle of nowhere. But I was hearing strange whispers around. Even though I couldn't quite understand where these whispers were coming from, they were gradually coming closer to me. Frankly, I was a little scared, because I've never experienced anything like this before. I stayed in that dream for a while. The whispers sometimes came from near, sometimes from far away. Even though I was dreaming, I was still very scared. I opened my eyes and quickly looked around. It was my first night in this house. Maybe that's why I felt weird. I stood up and went towards the kitchen. I got myself a glass of water. While I was drinking my water, I heard a strange buzzing sound from the living room. It was very strange. When I came into the living room with my glass of water, I saw that the television was on, but the screen was showing very complicated things. It was as if the channels were constantly being changed and the channels had blurry videos. I was scared for a moment. The TV had turned on by itself and it had startled me. I quickly walked over to the couch and grabbed the remote. Even though I pressed the button several times, the TV did not turn off. I then tried to unplug the TV and turn it off. When I brought the glass back to my lips, I saw that it was empty. It was very strange. I filled the bottle to the brim with water and only took a sip. Where did the water in it go? I guess I was sleepy and my head wasn't in the right place. I thought it would be best to go to the kitchen, drink my water, and go straight to my room and go to bed. I quickly came to the kitchen. I filled my glass with water again. I drank the water, left the glass in the sink, and walked toward the bedroom. I went inside and took off my clothes. Just as I was about to go to bed, I paused for a moment, because there was something moving under the covers. At that moment, I was stuck with him. I thought maybe a cat had gotten in. I didn't dare take the covers off the bed. I had goosebumps. I was even afraid to put my clothes on again. I was frozen in place. Good thing I noticed this before I went to bed. I took a deep breath. I collected my body. I just grabbed the edge of the quilt and pulled it up quickly. But there was nothing under the covers. I tossed the blanket around to check if there was anything underneath. But there was nothing. I couldn't sleep in this room anymore tonight. I took my clothes and put them on again. I think I was going to sleep on the sofa in the raft. I turned off the light in your room and then left your room and came to the living room. I lay on the couch and began to pray silently. Oh God, please help me. I thought maybe I was losing my mind. After reciting a few prayers, I closed my eyes. I never know when I fall asleep. Even though I was on the couch, I fell into a very deep sleep. When I woke up, it was already morning. I'm so hungry. I stood up immediately. I went to the kitchen. I opened the closet door and stood there for a few seconds. I was in no mood to prepare breakfast. I went into the bathroom and took a nice shower. I got ready and headed out to have breakfast. It was beautiful weather outside. Let me take a walk. Afterwards, I went to a nearby cafe. In the meantime, I had my breakfast and set out to take a walk. While walking, I paused for a moment, because I felt so weird. It felt like I had suddenly lost my memory. I didn't remember anything, not even for a few seconds. I had no idea where I was, who I was, or how I got here. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath and came to my senses a little. My knees ached, my bones ached. When I woke up in the morning, I felt very good. Now a heavy fatigue had settled over me. I came to a nearby bench. I sat down and started looking around. The sounds around suddenly stopped. It was as if I had gone deaf and strange whispers began to form in my head. These whispers do not belong to just one or two people. It was like 56 people were talking at once, and I had absolutely no idea what they were saying. Everything around was growing and shrinking. My eyes were going dark and my stomach was queasy. Maybe something I ate for breakfast upset my stomach. I was poisoned, but I had to fix this situation urgently. I tried to stand up and walk, but my knees trembled and I fell to my knees there. My eyesight went completely dark. I couldn't see anything around. I could hear footsteps approaching me at a rapid pace. Put my hands up in the air. Please help. I tried to say call an ambulance, but I couldn't speak. Even though the footsteps around me were approaching, no one was touching me. It was as if they were circling around him. No one goes to my district with me. He wasn't helping me. After a while, I fell onto my back. I started not breathing. My heart was pounding. I think I was dying. I tried to recite the Shahada. I couldn't even do that. My mind was literally playing tricks on me. I even forgot my name. I fainted there. When I opened my eyes, I was at a loss. A nurse was standing over my head. He seemed like a friendly, smiling person. You're fine when you see me awake. Don't worry, everything is there, he said. I tried to speak, but I still couldn't. I was feeling very tired. Don't bother me. Everything will be fine. Get some rest. I'll come later, he said and left the room. He was also very quiet. I turned and looked towards the window. It was almost dark. There was a strange problem inside me. I don't know why. A few minutes ago, I watched a motionless figure walk out. After a while, the door opened. A nurse walked in. He had a mask on his face. Only his eyes were visible. He approached me. He stood next to my bed. This was nothing like the nurse from before. His eyes looked strange. He had huge, jet-black eyes. We just stared at each other for a few seconds. Then he moved a little closer, and with one sudden move, he grabbed my throat. He was trying to strangle me. Even though I tried to stop him, I couldn't. It was as if my entire body was paralyzed. I felt like his hands were fire. It was burning my throat. His eyes were getting bigger and his gaze was changing. He was looking at me with eyes full of hatred. Suddenly, the mask on his face disappeared. His mouth was torn from ear to ear. His teeth were jet black and sharp. "Why are you bothering us?" he said, with a pretty spooky sound ending. I didn't understand what he meant. I couldn't even move my finger. He was trying to strangle me to death. This ridiculous nightmare continued for a few more seconds. Afterwards, my vision started to go black. I could feel that pressure on my throat. I could hear that terrible sound. But my eyes could not see anything. It was pitch black everywhere when the nurse's voice woke me up from this nightmare. Even though it was difficult, I opened my eyes. Everything seemed normal. The nurse who had just spoken to me was a smiling nurse. He must have seen the fear in her eyes because he came to me immediately. He held my hand. My hands are frozen. What happened? Are you okay? Let me take your blood pressure right away. He measured my blood pressure and told me that my heart rate was very high. How are you feeling? He asked. I took a deep breath. Even though it's hard, I'll pull myself together. I don't know. I feel very strange. I've been having ridiculous nightmares. I've been experiencing strange events at home since yesterday. The same thing happened at the park this afternoon. Now I've had another bad nightmare here. But I didn't sleep, I said I know. The nurse listened to me and was silent for a few seconds and said, I can help you see a psychologist if I want. He is my close friend. I don't know what to do when she said, I can help you. Maybe it's just because of the events I've been through lately. My mind, body, and soul are really tired. I said I need a good rest. The nurse smiled and held my hand and said, Don't worry, everything will be okay. Such things can happen to any of us, he said, trying to calm me down. I stayed in the hospital that night. I learned the name of my hometown. Her name was Sophie. Sophie and I became close. When Sophie told me she'd always dreamed of becoming a nurse since childhood, I was honestly a little happy. Because I think it's a wonderful thing for someone to realize a childhood dream. We chatted late that night, getting to know each other. We talked about our childhood memories and the good times. Later, Sophie said she needed some sleep and lay down on the spare bed in my room. After only 15 minutes, she asked me to put her to bed. I said, Okay, don't worry, you sleep. I'll be on duty here. Sophie fell asleep the moment her head hit the pillow. She was quite tired. I'd told her how difficult she'd been in the hospital, and how she'd sometimes had to deal with truly incomprehensible patients. So she definitely needed some rest. After she fell asleep, I picked up my phone and started fiddling with it a bit. While she was on the phone, I heard Sophie whisper something. I looked away from my phone and looked at Sophie. I didn't understand what she was saying. I told her to speak loudly, but Sophie had gone silent. Thinking she might be talking in her dreams, I didn't pay much attention. I went back to looking at my phone. A few seconds later, I heard Sophie laughing. It wasn't like that. She was practically laughing. Frankly, it scared me to hear someone sleeping laughing so casually. I called out to Sophie a few times, but she didn't answer. She kept laughing. Just as I was about to get out of bed and go to her, Sophie's voice stopped. I sat motionless on my bed for a few minutes, watching Sophie. I was silent. She was motionless. I looked at the clock. Sophie had only been asleep for 10 minutes. I was going to wake her in 5 minutes. I was hoping nothing ridiculous would happen in those 5 minutes, when suddenly, the room door slowly opened. I stared at the door, waiting for someone to come in. I immediately told Sophie to wake up, but she didn't wake up. No one was there, and the door had opened by itself. Her heart was beating like it was going to jump out of her chest. The hallway light suddenly went out. The hallway was pitch black. Only a small nightlight was on in the room. Even though I called out to Sophie several times, I still wouldn't wake up. I slowly got out of bed and went to Sophie's bed, saying to myself, God, please help me. I reached out my hand to her. I was only 1 step away from approaching her when the light in the room went out. I was now in pitch black darkness. I don't know why, but I stayed where I was. I couldn't move. I just whispered, Sophie, I'm begging you to wake up. At that moment, I heard a very loud scream in the room, and she started shaking. My son, I fell to the floor. I covered my ears with my hands and screamed. Help! I screamed. No one could hear me. Shouting, calling for help was useless. I wasn't alone in the room. I sensed someone's presence, someone trying to scare me, but I couldn't see them. I waited on my knees next to Sophie's bed for a while. Then I realized the sounds had stopped completely, and I opened my eyes. It was bright outside. I was kneeling next to the bed. I stood up immediately. I checked my surroundings. I did. The weather had brightened. It was morning. Sophie was not in her bed. At that moment, the door of the room opened. I turned around. Sophie was coming towards me with a smiling face. Good morning. Did you wake up? She said. When did you wake up and leave? When did morning come? I asked. Before she could even finish speaking, I showed her the huge shard of glass in your hand. Look, I found this under your pillow. I think you're going to kill me, aren't you? She said. When I looked at the shard of glass and said, No, I didn't put it there. She choked the piece without even letting me finish. Her white dress was stained with blood. When I saw Sophie in that state, I freaked out. Just then I woke up with a start. When I opened my eyes, it was morning again. But this time I was in my bed. I was alone in the room. At that moment, the door to the room opened again. Sophie entered the room with a smiling face. She walked quickly to me. She didn't say anything. She just stared at me. The meaningless look in her eyes told me I was in another ridiculous nightmare. I couldn't hold back my tears. I slowly reached out my hand towards Sophie's hand. "Please don't," I said, but she lifted the huge shard of glass she was holding behind her back and, wasting no time, clamped it down on her throat. She was covered in blood again. I screamed and screamed again. I called for help, but I woke up with a start from the bed again. I was covered in sweat. I couldn't breathe. I tried to pull myself together. I checked my surroundings. It was dark. Sophie was sleeping just a few feet away from me. I looked at the clock. Sophie had only fallen asleep for 10 minutes. My God, what kind of nightmare is this? Why doesn't time pass? I wondered if I'd experienced so many nightmares in just a few minutes. It was truly incredible. I called out to Sophie several times. "Please wake up. I'm not okay. I'm scared," I said. And Sophie opened her eyes, sat up in bed, and sat up. "What happened? Are you in pain?" she asked. "No, I'm scared." When I said I'd had another bad nightmare, Sophie got out of bed. She cleaned herself up and came over to me. "Don't worry. Everything will be fine. If you want, I can give you a painkiller. Sleep soundly tonight. I have a few things to take care of," she said. "No, I don't want to sleep. I just woke up anyway." Sophie said, "Okay, fine. Whatever you say. Save my number. Call me if anything happens. I'll come right away," I said. And after saving her number, I left. I got up and walked to the window. I opened the window and got some air. This air felt good. I had absolutely no idea what these events I was experiencing were related. He cast a spell on me, then cursed me. But the events I'd been experiencing lately weren't normal at all. I thought I was either truly crazy, or there was something else behind them. I waited in front of the window for a long time. I watched the sunrise. Then I washed my hands and face, got dressed, and left the room. The moment I left the room, I ran into you. He asked, "How are you feeling?" "I feel fine. I should go home now. I want to rest in my own home. You stayed with me last night. You were so supportive. Thank you so much for everything." "What do you mean?" "You can call me whenever you want," I said, and said my goodbyes and left the hospital. I came home. When I entered the house, I was filled with fear again. It was like there was something strange in this house. I didn't leave the house that day. I watched movies on my phone and had a snack. I stayed in bed until evening. Thank God. I hadn't experienced anything ridiculous. I thought, I guess I'm slowly getting over these situations. It was evening. It was dark. I went to the kitchen for dinner. After making myself something and eating, I knocked on the door. It was strange. There was no one here. I wondered if the owner had come to bed, or if it was one of the neighbors. I went to the door. I opened it. In front of it stood a little girl, about 5 or 6 years old. Her eyes were wide and green. She must have been crying a little. When I asked her, "Who are you?" "You're looking for me here," she said. "My mother hasn't come home yet. I'm so scared." "Can you stay with me?" I asked. "Who is your mother?" "My mother's name is Rachel." "My name is Lily. My mother didn't come home today, and I'm so scared. Stay with her for a bit. At least until my mother comes," she said. I couldn't stand children's tears. I didn't know her, but I still had to help her. "So where are you staying?" I asked. She said, "Upstairs." "Okay. You can stay here if you want." Now, when I said it wouldn't be right for me to come to your house, I have a cat at home. I didn't want to leave her alone. "I don't want it. Please come up," she said. The little girl insisted very much. The tears flowing from her eyes were hurting me. So I said, "Okay, stop the key, sir. I'll get my phone and come," I said. I quickly grabbed my keys and phone. I held the little girl's hand and went up the stairs. The girl opened the door and went in. She said, "Come on, come in," and invited me in. When I went in, I saw that this was just like my house, but the furniture was very different, and they were in better condition than mine. The little girl was running quickly, looking for her cat. "Snowball, where are you? Come to me right now." "Look, our guest has arrived," he said, and took out a cat with fluffy white fur from under the table. He brought it towards me. "Look, sister, this is my cat. Isn't Snowball so sweet?" he said and smiled. Yes, my dear, it is very beautiful, I said. He took my hand and brought me to the sofa. Sister, you sit here. Now I'm going to show you the pictures I drew, she said, putting the cat down and running to her room. The cat kept pacing back and forth. Then it moved to a corner of the room and started looking at me from that angle. The cat didn't take its eyes off me, not even for a moment. It obviously didn't like strangers. A few minutes later, Lily came back with a notebook in her hand. She excitedly placed the notebook in front of me and immediately started turning the pages. Look, I did this, she said. I did this too, but my mother helped me do this and showed me the pictures she had drawn one by one. The pictures were colorful and quite normal at first. Flowers, insects, the sun, small animals, birds, butterflies. She gave me the notebook and said, "Take it and look for yourself, while I'll go find my other notebook." And she quickly went to her room. As I slowly turned the pages, things started to get a little strange, because before, there were lively, beautiful pictures on the pages, but now the pictures were just pencil drawings and a mess. I couldn't quite make sense of the pictures. As I turned the pages, things became even more interesting. I stopped suddenly, because on this page, there was something on the page. The face was drawn, and this face looked quite scary. It had huge eyes and a mouth that was torn down to its ears. Its mouth had been sewn shut with a few stitches at the edges. There were only a few hairs on its head, and there was another huge eye in the middle of its forehead. But this eye was a little bigger and scarier than the other eyes. It scared me a lot that a little girl had such a mentality. I wondered if she had drawn this one too. I called out, "Lily?" but I got no answer. When I turned the next pages, I saw even scarier pictures. It was frightening. This time there were strange symbols, numbers whose meanings I didn't know. Where had this child learned these, or what did they mean? I stood up. As I was walking towards Lily's room, I heard an opportunity from behind. I quickly turned back and looked. I couldn't see anyone. The cat had stopped where it was. It was looking at me. This time its fur stood on end. It seemed as if it were scared of me. I turned back to face forward. I was only a few steps away from approaching the room when I heard Lily talking in a whisper to someone in her room. I told her to call her here. You wanted it. Do whatever you want. I can't stand seeing her here, I said, my knees weakening. I think they were talking about me. Or had I fallen into a trap? I immediately went into Lily's room. No one was there when she entered. I called out, "Lily, are you here?" But the room was empty. I looked in the closet, under the bed, and behind the curtain, wondering if she was hiding. She wasn't anywhere. I turned around and left the room. I came to the living room. That's when I encountered something terrifying. The cat, which had been making noise in a corner of the room a moment ago, was now torn to pieces. Its white fur was covered in blood. Seeing her like that made me sick. I threw the notebook I was holding in a corner and immediately started calling Lily. I called out several times, but I got no answer. An inner voice was telling me I had to leave here immediately, but I didn't want to leave that little girl here either. Maybe what I was going through wasn't about this house. It was just about my own thoughts, my own mind. That's why I didn't want to leave that child here alone. I started searching everywhere in the house, but I couldn't find Lily. When I came back to the living room, Lily was in the living room. She was standing in the middle of the room. She had a knife in her hand. Blood was dripping from the knife. She was hiding her other hand behind her back. I told her, "Lily, please put that knife down. You could hurt yourself." But she wouldn't listen. She had a frightening expression on her face that I couldn't understand. She looked at me without moving her eyes. She was smiling terribly. Suddenly, she showed me the hand behind her back. She had a cat's severed head in her hand. She put the bloody side of the cat's head in her mouth. After gnawing on it a little, she threw the cat's head in a corner. "I didn't like the taste of this. Let's try it for you too," she said, and started running at me with 2 knives in her hand. I'm a little child. I didn't know how much harm she could do to me, but I wasn't in a position to think about that at that moment, so I ran to the bathroom and locked myself in there. Lily was constantly kicking the door, screaming and swearing at me. She was laughing and saying she would cut me up with the knife in her hand, tear me into pieces and kill me. I was enjoying it. I didn't answer her. She was stuck in a corner of the bathroom. I was just praying to God. Suddenly I remembered my phone. I'd left it in the living room. Maybe I could have saved myself by calling the police, but getting out of here was impossible. Lily was at the door. Lily's screams didn't stop for a long time. She kicked the door hard. I was praying the door hadn't been broken. After a while, the sound stopped. Thank God, I thought. I can get out of here. But the lights went out halfway, and blood started flowing from under the bathroom door. Blood piled up all over the bathroom. That's when I heard Lily's voice again. You wanted this. You hurt me, she said. Thinking the little girl had hurt herself, I immediately opened the door. When I got out, I was speechless, because in front of me stood a creature at least 2 meters tall with long arms. Its face was the same as the one Lily had drawn in her notebook. I started screaming so loudly. I covered my face with my hands, fell to my knees, and began praying. It didn't help. The sound almost burst my ears. Thank God. Thank goodness that nightmare was short-lived, and when I opened my eyes, I had vanished. I checked my surroundings and slowly walked into the living room. I couldn't believe my eyes. Strange symbols were drawn all over the walls. There were Arabic symbols and numbers whose meanings I didn't know. The house was indistinguishable from a ruin. The windows were boarded up from the inside. I immediately started praying. Even though my prayers didn't do much for him, I thought he was at least protecting me. The terrifying pictures on the wall still give me goosebumps when I think of them today. I wasted no time and headed for the front door. I opened the door, went out, and walked quickly towards my apartment. When I opened the door and entered, I got another shock, because this place was the same as the house I had just left. There were strange symbols, scary pictures, and numbers whose meanings I didn't know on the walls. However, a very disgusting foul smell was coming from my apartment. I went in and looked around. This couldn't be where I lived. I thought I was losing my mind. As I tried to go out, the door closed by itself. I started hearing strange whispers from inside the house. What should I do? I didn't know. I walked to the window. I wanted to rip off one of the boards and scream out, call for help, but I couldn't. It was like I was losing my strength. As I struggled to get out of here, I suddenly heard someone calling me. When I turned around, I saw a woman wearing a white dress and long black hair. She had a baby in her arms. I paused for a moment when I saw the woman. I couldn't move. I couldn't say anything. The woman was gently rocking the baby in her arms and saying her goodbyes. Then she turned the baby towards me and said, "Please take her and take her away from here. I'm begging you." As she said these things, she slowly approached me. As she approached me, I could see the bruises on her face, the deep lines, and the cuts on her body. She held the baby out to me. But the baby was rotten, infested with worms, and in a horrible condition. At that moment, the door of the house opened. A tall, large, bald man walked in. He was covered in dirt. When I saw the woman, I said, "What are you doing there again? The table is still not ready." "How many times have I told you?" "I'll see the table ready when I come in," he said, and dropped his dirty hand on the floor. He came to the woman with quick steps. The woman's screams echoed throughout the house as he grabbed her by the hair and dragged her into the room. I didn't know what to do. It was clear I was in a ridiculous nightmare. But even if it was a nightmare, I wanted to help that woman. I pulled myself together and headed towards the door. When I opened the door and went in, I saw the man take the baby from the woman's arms and throw it hard against the wall. Even though the woman tried to stop the man, she could not, because the man was tall, big, and strong. A few minutes later, the woman stares into space, motionless. He was swinging his lap idly from side to side. She was singing a lullaby in a low tone. I think the woman had lost her mind. The man grabbed the woman by the neck and dragged her towards the living room. "Get up and prepare food for me now. I don't want you to deal with nonsense," she said. The woman sank to her knees and leaned her head on the ground as if in prostration. At first slowly, then quite loudly, she began to speak something in a language I didn't understand. She seemed to be cursing the man, because she looked at him and burst into tears. As the woman cursed, strange sounds came from all over the house. The house was shaking slightly. After a while, the man started looking left and right, as if there were people around him, and made movements as if he were trying to get away from them. The woman, on the other hand, was constantly shouting loudly, even screaming, cursing the man. Within minutes, blood began to flow from the man's eyes, ears, and nose. His lips stuck together, his hands and feet broke, and he turned over. He fell to his knees. He stood in front of the woman. He wanted to say something, but couldn't. The desperation in his eyes told everything. He wanted to tell her, "Please don't. Forgive me." But it was too late. The man, who had seemed so imposing and terrifying a moment ago, was now terribly dead and lying at her feet. Then the woman stood up. She smoothed back her messy hair as if nothing had happened and entered the room. A few seconds later, I heard the woman's voice again. She was singing a lullaby. My skin crawled. This nonsense had me dizzy. I approached the door and looked inside. The sight I saw when I entered almost drove me crazy. A tall, black creature was standing on top of the woman's head. The creature was stroking her hair. The woman, however, was smiling at the jet-black creature in her arms and singing a lullaby. As I stood in front of the door, watching them, the creature suddenly turned toward me and, with a sudden movement, walked toward me. I opened my eyes. When I opened my eyes, I was on the couch. It was dark. I quickly got up, turned on the house lights, and checked my surroundings. Everything seemed normal. I looked at the clock. It was 3:30. I was terrified. The events I'd experienced since arriving at this house were now overwhelming my mind. I wanted to pick up the phone and call Sophie, but I didn't want to disturb her at this hour. So even though it was difficult that night, I waited. I paced back and forth until morning. I did my best not to fall asleep. That night was perhaps the longest night of my life. I left the house at first light. I needed some fresh air, but there were only a few people outside at that hour. I felt very lonely and helpless. After wandering around outside for a while, I called Sophie. I told her what had happened. After Sophie asked what I told her, you know what? Actually, at first I thought it was psychological, but I think it has nothing to do with psychology. There might be something strange going on in that house. That's why you need to get help from a teacher, he said. I told him that I didn't know anyone like him, and that I didn't have any friends or relatives here. Don't worry, I'll send you my location in a bit. Come to the address. I said we would meet there and go together. I said okay. Not long after, Sophie sent me the address. I took a taxi and left. When I saw Sophie, I hugged her whole heart. Because I really needed this. We didn't say a word as we drove. I don't know why, but it felt like a weight had fallen on me. After driving for a while, we finally stopped in front of an old building. We went up to the second floor of the building and knocked on the door. I whispered, "What is this place? Who lives here?" When I said, "Be quiet, you will learn everything in a minute," he said. He opened the door to a young girl of about 25 years old. "Here you go. Who are you looking for?" he said. "Hello, is Mr. Thomas at home?" said Sophie to the girl. "Hello, is Mr. Thomas at home?" "Yes." He said he was at home and let us in. When we entered, we were greeted by a chubby man of about 65 years old, of medium height, with white hair and beard. He was quite cheerful. When he saw Sophie, he said, "Welcome, my daughter. Do you know the way here? I'll keep an eye on the road," he said and smiled. Sophie kissed Mr. Thomas's hand and said, "I'm sorry, I always said I would come, but I couldn't. But today I came to visit you and I had something to do for you." Sophie introduced me to Mr. Thomas and told him what had happened next. According to Sophie, Mr. Thomas was hospitalized years ago and Sophie took care of him. Mr. Thomas used to be a teacher, and his grandfather was a very powerful sultan. So he even said that he was very knowledgeable about these matters. Mr. Thomas listened carefully to what had happened to me, and I remained silent for a few seconds. He fell into deep thought. Then he asked me, "Have you ever had a spell cast on you, or have you ever been friends with someone who has cast spells?" No, I definitely did not do anything like that. I am very afraid of such things when I say this. Look, girl, such things do not happen to people easily. I think that someone who does not love you and sees you as an enemy may have cast a spell on you. But what you remember as the nightmare you experienced in that house may actually be the curse of that house. There is only one way to find out, he said and stood up. While walking, Mr. Thomas said, "My daughter, you come after me." I stood up and followed him. He entered a room and said, "Come on, go inside." Sophie had stayed in the living room. Mr. Thomas and I were alone in the room. He put a black-covered notebook in front of me and said, "Open and read what's inside." I opened the notebook and looked inside. There was nothing written. I looked at Mr. Thomas and said, "There is nothing written there." When I said, "Turn the pages." "You'll see in a minute," he said. As I turned the pages, I came across letters that were confusing, and I couldn't understand. I couldn't read these. When I turned a few more pages, there was writing here that was completely understandable, but I didn't know their meaning. I started reading them out loud. As I read, I felt like there was someone behind me. Cold sweat was flowing down my body. My eyes are getting dark. My hands were shaking. When I realized that I couldn't read any further and said sorry and raised my head, I froze for a moment, because behind Mr. Thomas stood a woman dressed entirely in black, wearing a chador. Mr. Thomas, when I say there is someone behind you, don't worry. He is my assistant. He can't do anything to you. You don't have to be afraid of him. If you see him, it means there's a haunting upon you, he said. I said, but how can I get rid of this haunting, teacher? He said, close your eyes and give me your hand. I closed my eyes. I held out my hand to him. Mr. Thomas took my hand and was running his finger across my palm as if he were writing something. Then he touched my fingers one by one. When he finally touched my finger, my arm felt paralyzed. I couldn't move my hand anymore. I wanted to speak, but I couldn't. I felt someone's presence behind me again, because their hot breath was on my neck. I wanted to speak. I wanted to say, please help me, but I couldn't. A little later, I heard Mr. Thomas's voice. He said, try to stand up and walk. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get up. Then Mr. Thomas grabbed my arm and pulled me to my feet. I wanted to open my eyes, but I couldn't. After a few men walked by, I stopped. If he hadn't wanted to, I would have opened my eyes. I was home at that moment. I was in my own home. How could this be? It was impossible. I had just gone to Mr. Thomas's house with Sophie. I said, my God, I'm in a ridiculous nightmare again. At that moment, I heard Mr. Thomas's voice. He said, my daughter, tell me what you saw there. I looked around, but I couldn't see Mr. Thomas. It was dark inside, but I could still hear that woman calling out her lair. And finally, she said, and this is my house. We are happy here with my daughter. Don't bother us, he said, and then he let out a very loud scream. That scream was so loud it nearly made my ears hurt. I covered my ears with my Islam and fell to my knees. Then I suddenly opened my eyes. When I opened my eyes, Mr. Thomas was standing in front of me and my hand was still in the air. Now it became clear to me. The curse of the house has fallen upon you. Someone died in that house and it was cursed. You went to that house and disturbed the people living there. That's all there is to it, he said. So what can I do? When I said, you said, don't worry, everything will be fine. I looked at my hand. I had another Nella's in my hand. When I asked Mr. Thomas if he did this, he said no. I never touched you. I was a little more scared when I heard this. But when you asked who was holding my hand earlier, he turned to me and said, it was my assistant who held your hand and helped you see those things. How? I just asked if the thing holding my hand was a being. Even though I was very scared, I still trusted Mr. Thomas. Mr. Thomas brought a glass of water for me. This water is not normal water. I prepared this water specially for you. When you drink it, all the weight on you will be lifted and the curse will be completely removed from you. Just don't go to that house again. He said never even go near that house. I took the water and drank it. Then I took the amulet that Mr. Thomas had handed me and put it in my pocket. Never let this amulet go of your side. The beings in the house only wanted to scare you and run you away from home. I said, if they had wanted to harm you, rest assured, you might not be here now. I didn't want to say anything more. I thanked Mr. Thomas. I wanted to pay a fee, but I refused. I did this for the sake of God, he said. Sophie and I thanked Mr. Thomas and left the house. We spent time together until that evening. Before it got dark, I went home, packed my things, and quickly left the house. I stayed at a hotel for a few days. Then I found someone suitable for me and moved in there. Thank God I still live in that house and haven't had any incidents with the panel. However, what happened in that house? Women, children, men. Maybe these things really happened. Maybe the events that happened there are real, but this reality sometimes pushes the limits of one's mind. That was my story. Instead of being afraid and running away from the situation you find yourself in, always look for a solution. Remember that every dark night has a bright morning. That's all the story, my friends. Thank you for listening. I love you very much. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, you can subscribe and turn on notifications to be informed about new videos. See you in new videos. Goodbye.